Okay, welcome to the Cluster API Provider AWS meeting of the 2nd November 2020. Please note we are working under the auspices of the CNCF Code of Conduct. Be excellent to each other. We've got quite a few people on the call, so please use the raise hand feature if you wish to make a comment. And we'll get started. So 2 PSAs. First of all, some discussions upstream in Slack. So we've decided to introduce architectural design records for design decisions which are smaller than a cluster API enhancement proposal, of which we are about to discuss one. So I just want to draw people's attention to that. That should be better than sort of people trying to dig through issues in PRs to figure out design decisions. And also just make a note, we are looking to release V062 this week. I will get around to PRs if I haven't reviewed them. If others also could join the effort, and if there's PRs which are lacking reviews, if you could take a look, that would really help. And with that, let's take the first issue. I've forgotten who raised this, but this is the future of the AWS resource reference type. Can someone speak to that?
Yeah, that was me. So, hello, everyone. I've only recently been kind of working with this, and as I was going through a lot of the code base, I found a lot of references to the AWS resource reference type that was inconsistently being implemented. So there was a lot of cases where only the ID value, actually, so for those that aren't aware, the AWS resource reference has 3 properties on it: ID, filter, and ARN, I believe. And in a lot of cases in the code, only the ID is being used and the others are just ignored, or in some instances, we'll actually throw an error if other values are provided. So the only reason I'm raising this is as the potential change of types is coming for the V1 Alpha 4, I thought it would be good to take a look at this and look at either ensuring all the logic is implemented where needed, or changing some of the types that are just using the ID, for example, and just having them as a string array. I think one of the examples I've got is when providing subnets, just an array of the subnet IDs is good enough, and that's what the code is doing currently. So, yeah.
Thanks for that. And I think discussions in the past, so in the past it was decided that we would start moving to not having the AWS resource reference, because for some of these things, it's you get into slightly undefined behavior when, if you're doing filters on, say, subnets and the tags of those subnets change, then what is your expected outcome for maybe, say, an existing AWS machine? Like, how do you reconcile how that AWS machine came to be where it is now versus what the expected spec is, which is why that decision was made, although not implemented, to shift away from the AWS resource reference to array strings. I don't feel super strongly about any of this, so that's all open to revisit. So I think some people had some use cases where that might be where using filters would be more useful, or yeah. Anyone else? Richard.
Ian, I guess if we do change it, when we come to name the fields, it'd be good if we actually change the fields so that it's obvious that it's a subnet ID. It doesn't just say subnets, because I don't know whether I need to stick an ARN in there or the actual ID. So if we do go down the route of actually just having explicitly the IDs, that we name the field as, so there's no confusion there as well.
Anyone else? Maybe not. Maybe there's the next step here that we, and I think that we do that collecting all those instances of unimplemented logic, because it might be that some of those are amenable to using filters and don't lead to undefined behavior if something else has changed, or at least it's not a big issue, whereas something that is around security groups probably is more like. So I think maybe as a next step, that will then allow more people to have a say in what they want to happen. Let's get all of these instances in. I did volunteer on Slack, but I would appreciate someone else to help me with that effort, to try and find out how is it. If you can put your name in the doc or in the chat, then that'd be great. Thanks, Marcus. All right, let's move on to the next one. I guess it's Marcus. This is you. Do you want to take
sure.
that?
So this is related to the one we've just spoken about. When specifying AMIs, there's quite a disjointed interface compared to like the AWS resource reference, in that you're able to specify, there's an AMI object where you can specify the AMI ID, but then there's also properties that are called image lookup, org, image lookup, filter, something like that, are various different ones that are separate to this AMI object. So when I was coming to it new, it was very confusing as to what I'm meant to be providing where and all this kind of thing. So I think as part of the V4 Alpha 4 types, it'd be good to get that cleaned up and either rationalize it all into the AMI object or something along those lines.
Yeah, sounds great. Does anyone want to respond to that? Richard?
Probably just a couple of things. I don't know whether they're related. So in the Azure provider, we implemented separate types for the different type of lookup or source location. And that was, I can't remember whether it was a raw reference or some other type. But so it was explicit. I'd have to go back and look at the Azure provider, what we did there. But then also it'd be good to, I don't know where this falls into this, is how we also specify that we may, we want to use Bottle Rocket as our base AMIs instead of Ubuntu images. So sort of related, but how do we mix all that together? I'll get you the name of the thing that we use in Azure, and I'll put that in the document.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, cool. Dane.
Yeah, there's definitely a weird interaction with some of those things. I know one of the AMIs are regional, and so I think having default of having people specify, I might be stating the obvious here, but having a default of forcing people to specify an AMI by default would be bad. A lookup is much more convenient and much more user-friendly and sane. But I do think both, however we do it, I think both methods need to be supported, both to support people that do actually build custom AMIs per region or whatever for their internal use cases, as well as a lookup. I guess I'm not aware. There's a possibility that maybe you could write your own custom AMIs to SSM somewhere. I've never tried to do such a thing. I don't know if that's a read-only API, but that may be an avenue to make it more consistent so that it's only a lookup. Anyway.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. It's read write, for it's just there's Amazon have their read-only keys, but there's nothing to stop you writing that. And we are using that in Jonathan's implementation for secrets backend anyway. That could work. Marcus.
Yeah, just another thing that I remembered, I think it came from Slack. When it comes to machine pools, there was a mention of making sure that all the instances within the ASG are using the same AMI, and then if that AMI changes because it's using a lookup or whatever, all instances need to cycle at the same time. All instances need to be cycled rather than new ones that are scaling have one AMI, etc.
Yeah, I think related to that is the we want to hold the AMI steady for a machine deployment, even so that it's an explicit action to update an AMI, even if you're not using autoscaling group. Dane.
Yes, exactly. Especially in machine deployments, that's a big problem right now. We have a lot of skew across our fleet because of this. And it hasn't caused us any problems. But the day that Amazon releases an AMI with a little problem in it, I'm sure we'll notice. And that'd probably be kind of tricky to debug. I'm all for that. I don't know how. I think some further discussion is going to be needed on the how and the interface. Like, are we going to actually own that cycling process? Is that logic going to exist in CAPI or Kappa, or are we going to delegate that to some kind of external tool?
I don't know. I think the simplest solution was we would resolve the AMI ID on the AWS machine template, and then you would explicitly roll the AWS machine template, and that would trigger the update just using standard cluster API mechanisms.
There is a trade-off. Well, there may be additional logic needed in the AWS machine pool controller, because right now AWS machine objects don't exist for members of an AWS machine pool. So, and machines don't exist either. So it could be a little, and it's not that those things can't be implemented. This is one of the use cases where I think they would be handy, because it would be a nice interface to actually replace machines from.
Agreed. Marcus?
Yeah, so with machine pools, because they generate an ASG behind the scenes, for the cycling, you can use, what do you call it, instance refresh. That's fairly recent in AWS. I think it's instant refresh, which basically does a kind of a safe cycling of all the instances within an ASG. So that could be a potential way of handling it for machine pools, at least. I don't know what happens today if any changes are made to a machine pool. So, like for example, if the instance type is changed in code, does that trigger anything today or not?
I could answer that. Yes, if you change anything in the spec that would affect the launch template or the ASG, then an update is going to be called on the object to update the underlying autoscaling group or launch. It's going to create a new launch template version and then set hit as the active launch template for the ASG.
But that will only affect new instances launched, correct? Does it not touch the running?
It does not touch the running today. So there is a path where we could use the instance refresh as well. Right now, we do not have any lifecycle hooks in the ASG, and we probably should for reasons like that. Even if Kappa elected not to use instance refresh or one of those interfaces, a human operator might. And right now, that would just result in a bunch of instances being deleted without being drained, which would be bad. So I think we'll need some kind of webhook or SQS or something. I haven't researched greatly how we could tie into the lifecycle hooks, but I know there's many options there. So.
Correct. Is the tricky thing here that the instance refresh is an imperative operation? So how do you? Yeah. Okay. Okay. I don't think we. Okay, I think what we need here is a couple of people to basically figure this out. So I think we can't do all of this in one massive V1 Alpha full spec. We need to start breaking this out. There's quite a few things, and I particularly don't have the knowledge around machine pools enough. So I think we need some volunteers who can rally on this effort. Yeah, Marcus.
Yeah, so this is something that we would very much like to make use of these kind of changes. So yeah, I'm happy to look at this.
Dane, is that you volunteering?
Yes, likewise. Happy to collaborate with you, Marcus, and help get those things over the finish line.
Cool. That's great. Thanks. Unless there's anything else, we'll move on to the next one. Richard, packaging of EKS components.
Yeah, so this was raised as an issue by someone where they'd enabled the feature flag for EKS via environment variable, but they hadn't installed the control plane or the bootstrap provider. So when they went to create a non-EKS cluster, essentially it raised an error because the which controllers is it? It's the managed cluster and the machine pool, managed machine pool running because of the feature flag, but the CRD is not installed because the control plane is not installed. So basically, yes, it just causes a problem. So I had a look at it. So it raises the question of how we package EKS going forwards, because some are like especially the machine pools, they straddle both worlds. They have to have the control plane there, but we have, it's optional that someone enables the control plane because you have to use the -- control plane in cluster cuttle. So really, it's how we go about doing that. On the issue, we put 4 options. So the obvious one is that we put the AWS managed control plane CRD definition into the infrastructure components YAML. That would fix the problem, but I'm not entirely sure that's ultimately the best option. We could also check in the infrastructure manager, so the main manager, if the EKS flag is specified, feature flag is specified, but the control plane is not there, then we could error out saying, hey, you haven't enabled the control plane. Another one was we actually move around the controllers, and we move the managed machine pool and the managed cluster controllers into the control plane. That would work as well. And then actually someone else suggested that we can create a completely separate manager for EKS, but that doesn't really work because there's some crossover with just normal machine pools and stuff like that. So really it's a question of how we enable this in the future, or package the whole of EKS support.
My understanding, it wasn't just machine pools, basically AWS machine, right? Resolves the AWS cluster object.
Yeah.
And there's an interface which might be a AWS cluster, or it might be an AWS control plane.
Yeah, it's basically an if statement there that checks that. Yeah. Something else been thinking about sort of related to this is we have the AWS managed cluster, which doesn't basically do anything. It's just a vehicle for reporting the control plane URL and failure domains back to CAPI. And we were just talking about this the other day, is whether we can have the cluster reference, the infrastructure cluster, and the control plane reference as the same object, and merge the AWS managed cluster and AWS control plane controllers together, instead of these 2 separate ones, which would sort of solve this problem anyway. Sort of bending the rules a bit here, but something to think about.
Anyone have a take?
To be honest, I'm in favor of if someone has specified the feature flag, EKS feature flag, and the CRD is not there, we error out and say, hey, make sure you've enabled the control plane, because that feels like an error scenario. You know, someone's trying to use EKS functionality without installing the control plane. But
it's the simplest one that doesn't require other larger changes.
Yeah.
I think Dane,
Yeah, that seems like the best option. I don't know. I don't fully understand why the CRD didn't end up there if they were planning on using the EKS things. I'm not real comfortable with moving the objects around too much if we could help it, or at least maybe not till like V1 Alpha 4. We had to unwind that in some of our old clusters that we'd spun up early on in development, and that wasn't too fun. Finally, the last piece was, and this is only tangentially related to that, to all of that. When we moved around the managed control plane out of infrastructure and into its own, into the control plane group, there are still, I think, 2 points in the code that are setting owner refs with the wrong group, with the old group. And I don't know if Me2 created an issue for that yet. But if she has not, I'll follow up, and one of the two of us will create an issue for that.
okay, I think, yeah, maybe just check. Can I leave that as an action item in the menu? I think, yes. I think we're given breaking API change, going with the erroring out is probably best idea. I would also say that if we were going to do anything else, we should probably have a KEP or design doc for the managed control plane in general as well. We should probably try and get that in place for V1 Alpha 4, just so we've got a steady document describing what we expect. Richard?
yeah, I agree. I think that's probably erroring out is best option. I can do an ADR for that. This I guess this scenario it also applies to Azure. They have that same essentially null Azure managed cluster, if I remember rightly, just to pass the required values back to CAPI from the control plane. So yeah, I guess for future we could actually come up with a better solution for this.
Agreed. Do you want to take that as an action item then to try and sort of figure out a long-term solution, maybe with the Azure one, and
yeah, sure,
see what's possible? Okay, cool. Thanks. Oh, and I think the last one is me. So I think I was on leave actually 2 weeks ago when I joined a meeting, and obviously I decided to watch Netflix and cycle around instead of send out a doodle meeting. So I created a doodle poll which covers at least this week. If people are interested in the V1 Alpha 4 sort of general, I mean, with the primary focus on the network design, and I will link that doc again. I realize I've not been sharing my screen the whole time. Probably fine. Yeah, so if people are about, fill in that, and yeah, that's basically it. If there's anything else that people want to talk about, have we got anything urgent that we need to deal with for V062? Richard?
Yeah, sorry. So I'm working on the end-to-end tests for the managed side of the provider. Currently, they're they run under the same target. There's just a different feature, or whatever they call it. So it takes a long time to, it takes 15-20 minutes to create the cluster, the control plane, sorry, and we run multiple tests. These end-to-end tests are going to take a very long time to run. So I don't know whether it'd be best to separate them out onto a separate target, just so they can be run separately to the normal end-to-end tests.
Yeah, I was thinking that maybe if they could also be done as separate, probably would be a bit of a refactoring job, but to have separate packages, so like a common for all the shared stuff, and then put the conformance in its own package rather than using the Jinko focus, that you're explicitly saying you're running a test against that package, and that E2E package is running that particular test. Another thing that we did a little while ago is where possible, like try and combine orthogonal features into the same test, so that it's, so rather than spinning up a cluster for every single test, try and test, like I think we had one where it was creating a persistent volume, and another one that was creating a load balancer, and there were two separate clusters. We just merged them into one, so we're not creating cluster individually for just testing CPI behavior, that we do all those tests in a single go in the main one, so you're not having to constantly wait, or not have to wait a long time for like 10 different clusters to be built.
Cool. Yeah, I'll make sure that I combine the tests. And there's a few that are together, but yeah, I'll make sure I switch them down as much as possible.
Cool. Does anything else? If not, see you in 2 weeks.
See ya.
See ya. Bye, everyone.